you give us a quick background?
Yeah, sure. So thanks, Sam. So I'm Derek, and I think I'll just give a quick introduction of like my journey through crypto, right? So I think before this, like I think most of you are from Singapore. So for some context, I was an MOE teacher before this, right? I taught GP at a local JC, right? But in my free time, I also dabble in crypto, right? Social trading and things like that. And then because of one friend, right? So he's here actually today, Colin, right? He's a true OG here. He introduced me to the deeper side of things of crypto, and I got really hooked and interested. So I started writing a lot of my own stuff. I did a lot of research on my own. I produced stuff on my own, and then I got a gig at Tech Asia, right, as a crypto journalist. And then from there, I got to Bybit, and after Bybit, I was choosing my career path, and I think Spartan Labs is the perfect place for me to go. So I'm helming the research unit there right now. Yeah.
Thanks, Derek. What about you, Tobias?
Yeah, thanks for having me. I originally from the private equity side, right? And then I crossed a lot of different ways into the traditional tech side, down to having an own company. Ended up in the crypto space in late 17, but more on the personal side, and then working with Blockchain Founders Fund for the last 3.5 years. We basically started more off as a consulting company, and we're driving most value as sort of an accelerator-like business. We then raised 2 funds since then and invested in 104 companies over the last 3 years, and done everything super early stage from DeFi, gaming, infrastructure deals, and obviously now with the new fund, I'm very excited to back a lot of companies moving forward. We're mostly equity focused though, so we're not a pure token fund. We have some token exposure as well, but it's more like just trying to be very early in a lot of really interesting equity deals, and then still help drive value as much as we can. And yeah, that's kind of like where we are.
Cool, thank you. So Derek, given your journalist background, maybe you could give us a quick overview of what's been happening in crypto so far, and then we'll let Toby jump in as well.
Yeah, for sure. So I think there are a few really huge events that I think everyone knows about, right? So obviously everything was kickstarted by the collapse of Terra, right? Or we know it as Luna, right? That's the token ticker. And I think that led to a ripple effect across the whole space, right? We recently had 3AC filing for bankruptcy. We had Celsius also doing the same, right? US authorities are probing Celsius as well after the withdrawal freeze. So, I mean, there's these 3 huge titans within the space that fell, right? I think that definitely had a huge effect on the various sub-verticals within the space, right? Including the DeFi space, right? But, amidst all these doom and gloom, right? There are some, really interesting progressions within the space as well, right? Magic Eden, right? One of the bigger, NFT marketplaces as well now, right? They actually raised quite a bit of money recently, right? There's that, right? And there's also the Ethereum merge is coming soon, right? Hopefully it doesn't delay anymore, right? And then some lesser known ones that I was keeping an eye on, TechHuer, right? Their watches actually now can display NFTs, right? So they have the integration now. Several things like GameStop, right? They released their NFT platform. I think Reddit did as well, right? And obviously Steppen, the Move to Earn protocol, right? They disclosed their earnings, right? It was pretty, it was very bullish news for them, right? And recently, Polygon, right? They were chosen for the Disney Accelerator program. So there's all these, interesting things that are happening as well. It's not just all doom and gloom. So, yeah, I think that more or less covered the past few weeks or months, actually. Yeah.
And Tobias, what about you? Are you seeing anything different from Derek?
No, I mean, definitely I agree with all he said. I think it's probably interesting from an investor perspective. Everybody's saying no one is investing anymore, right? I mean, I don't think it's fully true. I mean, it's obviously it shifted a little bit. It's not as much token focus as it used to be. Right? A lot of people are like now sort of regrouping and understanding where the industry is going, waiting on if that's the bottom already or not. But we still have great projects raising, right? Even like in our portfolio, we still have a company called Grid. She still raised 600K in the first token round she was doing, right? Of course, on the equity side, early stage deals with interesting trajectory to a product, a working product, are still in a pretty good spot. Maybe ticket sizes became smaller, right? Typically, we wanted to invest a large amount, and then it changed a little bit. But our deal flow is still crazy, right? We're receiving more products than ever. Right? People are still building, and it's interesting to see that, especially in like gaming, metaverse, all these type of things, which was obviously very hyped, a couple of months ago. Now it became a very different landscape. Right? In the beginning, every game company raised multi-million-dollar rounds, and now I think it changed quite a bit. And people are now a lot more like, okay, now we need to look at basics, and obviously it shows who've done a better risk management or less better risk management sort of over the last month. But I think in general, like, we are very excited about this time right now. It really brings the builders and the believers in the space, and like pushes out a little bit of the noise and the whole BS side of things. But overall, yeah, I think it's going to be interesting what regulatory frameworks are also going to do. Right, there's a lot of uncertainty still of like how stablecoins are going to be treated. I also think that Singapore will react to an extent, with Three Arrows Capital being, still predominantly based here. So there will be changes. I don't think it's going to be for the worst. I think it has a beneficiary, sort of a positive impact on the space. But of course, it will make things challenging over the short term, right? But yeah, we're excited what's happening, and we are like, obviously still deploying, as maybe not so many funds are doing anymore.
Cool. Thanks for the color. Derek, so congratulations on Spartan Lab launching. Are you guys incubating anything exciting within Spartan Labs itself?
So I think Spartan Labs, right, we are not really an incubator per se, right? So we are a venture studio. What we do is really we co-build with people. So, it's like a very intensive kind of venture building. We don't really, look for founders who already have, like the X factor, right? So we will build the original idea first, right? We have our in-house capacities. We have our product managers, our builders, our devs, the whole full suite of builders, right? And we will validate, we will test, we will come up with an idea that is solid, right? And then we'll bring people on board after that, onboard them from either Web 2 or Web 2.5, right, to come and execute an idea. Yeah, so that is what we do actually. And I think right now we have a few partnerships in place, right? But I don't think I can see them because of some PNC conditions. So but yeah, we're definitely looking into the metaverse space, right? The whole idea of X2E, and yeah, the NFT space as well. So yeah.
Cool. And Tobias, anything exciting amongst your portfolio companies that you'd like to highlight to the audience?
Yeah, we're doing about 6 deals right now, actually, which is kind of crazy. But I think one deal we're very excited about is maybe I'm going to start with equity and then go on the token. So like we've done a really interesting one called Crane, which is sort of a multi-sig security solution. It's really interesting. The two founders are fintech, and the other guy is a very successful CTO in a crypto space. So they bring sort of these two ideas together, and apparently the product has been very popular with like family offices or like smaller funds who like really want to manage their wallets and all their access. So I think that's an interesting one, because also what Derek, you basically said, with all the stuff which happened in a sort of more deteriorating way, people looking more back of how can we make things more secure, more safe. We have done a really interesting token deal called LimeWire. I don't know if you guys are familiar with the brand, which sort of got, like, the founders actually bought the brand again and now had a massive launch event in New York City and basically use it for music and NFTs. So the guy grew up in the same hometown as I am. So I know him from way back. So it's a really interesting point that we're probably the only two people out of my small hometown who end up in crypto. But that's sort of a side thing. We still have Splinterlands in our portfolio, which now obviously larger than Axie. Still has 177,000 daily active users if you check DApp Radar. And then another interesting company which just closed a 2.7 million seed round, which is called Grid, which is a no-code gaming platform. The round was led by Bill Ackman, and then also just recently Paris Hilton invested in their token, which is also quite interesting, but it has an interesting angle from a community perspective, right? Because they're doing a bunch of stuff already, and obviously she has a mass amount of followership. So a lot of people rushing already into the community and building out games and making the thing more scalable. So like, there's a lot of stuff happening, very diverse. And I think the key point is really that we need to see a very short way of monetization or actually launching a product, which is different from the bull market.
Thanks. And so I've been hearing this theme coming up a lot, metaverse, right? Maybe this is a question for both of you. In terms of the metaverse, what exactly excites you about it? And what do you see as the sort of trend over the next 1 to 3 years? How would it evolve? And maybe you can start with Derek on this.
Yeah, sure. So, okay, the metaverse is a concept that is quite talked about a lot, but no one really knows what it is, right? Because there's no fixed definition of the metaverse, right? It is quite gray in that. Is it P2E games, right? Is it, even if you just look at it this way, right? This Zoom session is a metaverse, for all intents and purposes. So I think there's, like for me, I always like to differentiate between virtual environments and metaverses, right? And I think when it comes down to that, metaverses are virtual environments that are interoperable, right? They are seamless, and I guess it's transparent, it's decentralized, and all the typical buzzwords, right? Self-custody, things like that, right? And for my view of what the metaverse would eventually be like, I think 1 to 3 years, right? To me, there's a time frame that we will not get to see the full version of the metaverse. To me, the metaverse, I have a very lofty and ambitious idea of what it is, right? It's beyond just earning APRs through P2E games, things like that. So I think if to really discuss my vision of that, I have to go back first to how technology is really shaping up now. Right? So we're living in an age where technology is replacing a lot of jobs, a lot of human labor, manual labor, right? And what that does, it kind of pushes the labor triangle up, right? Where people, unfortunately at the bottom, right, they will get sieved away. They'll find themselves unable to adapt to the new world because of technology, things like that. Ironically, I feel like the metaverse, right, the technology that it brings, right, will actually help these people, right? Because what the metaverse does is they remove the layers of abstraction between humans and computers, right? Let me give you an example. If let's say you have to ask your grandmother, right, or grandfather to use the computer, to use Excel, a dashboard, things like that, right? I think they'll find it really difficult because it's not intuitive, right? What the metaverse to me does, right, is they enable someone like your grandmother, right, to learn something virtual, right, really quickly, right? And how they can be empowered to do that is through their limbs, their eyes, right, through moving their limbs, because that's the base layer of all human nature, right? To me, that's the metaverse. And I think we are seeing some parts of that coming up. So I don't know if you all know ProtectWise. There's this company called ProtectWise. I think they were a Verizon company or something. Yeah, so they are a cybersecurity firm, right? And they have embraced the metaverse, right? By swapping out all their dashboards, right? All their logs files and everything, all the Excel sheets, right? For a virtual environment. So for the employees, right? They don't, when they have to debug, certain servers and, deal with some security issues with their servers, right? They don't actually have to look at dashboards or log files, right? They enter a virtual environment, right? With buildings, with each building representing a server, right? And then if there's a bug, right, it will appear as an enemy ship, or something. So they just have to go in physically, use their hands to take it out and then drop it into something, and then someone debug it for them. Yeah. So to me, that is that should be the final iteration of the metaverse, right? And I think we are seeing some projects coming up to do that. I'll share more later on one of them, right? Yeah, but I think that is my idea of what the metaverse should be like, actually.
Thanks. And Tobias, what about yourself?
Yeah, I think it's all really interesting thoughts and directions Derek pointed out. I think for us as an investor, it's still we're still trying to figure it out, right? So just to give you guys an idea, I probably have seen since beginning of this year, probably like 1,000 different metaverses. I mean, I'm not actually exaggerating. Like everybody's building a metaverse for education, for gaming, for events, right? For basically everything. And now the question we have to ask us as an investor is, what kind of landscape are we foreseeing with metaverses, right? Is that going to be 100 or 1,000 different metaverses, all with users covering different spaces and different spots, different utilities? Or is it going to be like 3, 4, 5 being the dominant ones, and then we have a couple of niche ones which cover very specific systematic and capture the users? Now, on the other side, the question is how strong are we on the hardware side to actually make the technology immersive? Right? Because right now, and like everybody who has ever been in Sandbox, Decentraland, or Superworld, or like all the other metaverses, it's not actually a very immersive and interesting sort of time thing. I get it from an asset appreciation perspective. If you buy land and buy all these things, it can be very interesting. And of course, a lot of corporates, they want to go into the space because they look innovative if they buy land in a metaverse, even though they're never going to use it. But like the whole point on the other side is more like, what is the actual utility going to be like? Right. So like right now, we as an investor, we looked at more on infrastructure projects, which will then supply multiple different metaverses, right? So instead of betting on a couple different metaverses and betting on the technology and betting on their graphics and design, you bet on the overall industry, right? And I think that metaverse as an industry will succeed is probably, not a no-brainer, but there's probably a very high likelihood that this industry is going to become relevant, especially as hardware is going to improve, make it more immersive, and you have a lot of corporates rushing in. There's a good trajectory for growth. So now we're looking for companies, how do we bring e-commerce? How can we bring branding? How can we bring infrastructure, design services, insurance, like all these types of things which you need in real world, which then hopefully need in metaverses as well. So we're looking at it from this perspective. But overall, we're very bullish on the space. It's just a little bit early for us to bet on very specific projects as of now. I'm not saying we're not going to do it, but it has to be like really convincing and really interesting. And we need to see a lot more people using it, right? Because if you actually look at the baseline of users and how much time they're spending in those metaverses after the pandemic ended, it's a very, very different picture, right? And we just want to see that being more utilized and being more used for the actual purpose of the metaverse, not just from a purely asset appreciation perspective.
And maybe Tobias, this is a question for you first, and Derek. What do you think needs to happen before the metaverse trend really takes off? What are the ingredients needed, and what are the sort of catalysts needed before it really takes off?
I think as high level, like 3 points for me, right? The first point I mentioned briefly, which is hardware. And right now I get it. You can buy like, all these different glasses and backpacks and things like this. And I've done a couple of these things as well, but it's not actually yet there, right? Because you still don't want to use this and wear this for like 6 hours straight and like party in front of you. No, right? It's still not there yet. But I think we're in a pretty good spot, and we do see a lot more corporates, a lot more big players, even startups like building products and money is being invested in the space. The second part is, how can we connect real life with the metaverse, right? Can I buy something in a metaverse and then get it delivered to my door, right? Or can I use, as a brand, can I use the metaverse to showcase products, and I can use this with physical products and items and connect essentially the people in the metaverse. And the third is, in my opinion, UI UX / infrastructure, right? Right now, it's still difficult sometimes to actually get access and take part in the crypto side of the metaverse. It's easy to make an account and walk around and have a live event there. But if you actually want to use all the services, it's still not so easy. And as I said, exactly what Derek said with his grandma or mom or anyone who wants to get in that space, it's still not as easy, right? Because you have all the friction, you need to open a wallet, like you have all these different things. So like, we need to figure out something which makes it a lot more accessible to a lot of people. So these things, in my opinion, the biggest blockers right now for metaverse is to succeed on a large scale.
And Derek, anything to add, or do you agree with Toby's points or not agree with them?
For sure, I agree with him. Right, I mean, I think hardware is always something that will be a limitation for tech, when we are trying to move as fast as we want to, right? For the metaverse for my vision of metaverse to take place, right? Like I said, I don't think it's a 3-year process, right? It can be up to 10 years. Spatial computing, right, is a pillar that's come up, right? Game engines is another pillar that's come up in tandem for that dream, per se, to be realized. And I think more than that, there's also the softer side of things, right? The non-hardware side of things that has to happen. Right now, a lot of people, see the crypto space, not just the metaverse space, right, as like a get rich quick, kind of thing. There's 3 camps, right? It's either you're so into, this whole movement, right, or you love it, like all of us, right, I guess, right? Or you see it as a get rich quick scheme, right? You see it as like, monetary gains. Or the third group, I don't really see it scamish or scary, right? I think that there has to be a melding, right? A more balance, in how people view things before the metaverse can come up, right? Because if this persists, right, then I think there'll always be the chasing of high APRs. There'll be chasing of P2E, earning tokens to earn more tokens, things like that, right? And I think that's just not sustainable, right? It's not a model that will empower the metaverse to grow to what it should be. So I think that's that also. I mean, but there's a conversation beyond just the metaverse, right? It spans across the different sub-verticals, throughout the crypto space in DeFi, right? With the revenue generating protocols, right? Instead of just emission-based things like that. There's so many things that have to change for this space to really mature, even the metaverse, right? Yeah.
Okay. And outside of the metaverse, are there any other trends that you guys are excited about? And maybe we can go with Derek for this one first.
Right. Okay. I think this kind of segues perfectly from what I just mentioned, because I think that I'm quite excited about various domains, right? Like DeFi, for example. So DeFi has crashed pretty badly, right, in terms of TVL and market cap, right? I think it was around 3-4 months ago, it was 140 something, right, million. Right now it's just 30 something, right? So it crashed more than 75% in just a matter of months. I mean, it's because of the things that that happened, 3AC, things like that, the macro doom and gloom. But because of that, right, I think, as Tobias mentioned, it roots out a lot of noise, right? The good thing about cycles is that when there's a down, right, you kind of see the true builders, come to the fore, right? And these are people who have, I would like to say, right, like real heart for the space, right, who want to see it flourish, not just for the APRs, right, not just for farm and dump kind of thing, right, but for real growth. And I think we're starting to see that now. In DeFi, we have more protocols moving towards true value accrual, right, true value generation, true revenue generation as well, right? In the past, certain things like liquidity mining, right, the printing of money through emissions, high APRs, right, it was all to bootstrap users into the protocol to get as much TVL as possible in the quickest, shortest amount of time in the protocol. All that, has proven to be unsustainable. I think that's the beauty of this whole, this whole phase right now, right? And I think a lot of protocols right now, this is not investment advice, by the way, it's just, personal, like research and stuff. So GMX, SNX, Joe, YFI, right? They are all looking into true revenue and value generation, right? So I think that is where I'm excited to personally, on a personal note, right, to keep an eye on, because I think when we see a second coming for this space, right, I think it'll be a great one. So yeah.
And Tobias, any other verticals outside of the metaverse that you're excited about?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I'm very excited about this infrastructure play, right? I'm not just purely talking about layer ones or stuff like this, which I do think it's interesting, but it's more like, because I feel like we need to have a lot more people in the crypto space, right? And there's like 2 ways of doing this, right? So you either make it a lot easier, or you bring more capital into the space. And more capital, not necessarily to like more investors who raise $4 billion funds, but to make it simpler for capital to access the space, right? So like DAOs could be a really interesting angle. Well, like you had Uniswap and SushiSwap and all the DEXs essentially building up a great liquidity for the previous bear market. We now need to figure out another interesting point of liquidity entrance into the space. right? Because that gives access to more capital from a founder perspective. And I think also that not necessarily the typical VC structure is the right fit for all the stuff been done in the crypto space, right? You probably want to have more diversified. You want to give creators more access to capital. You want to give certain communities more access to capital. You want to incentivize them and bring this to a whole different level. I just don't think we have found the right economies, right, as of yet. I think also that gaming could be an interesting space, but we haven't found the right economy yet. There's so many, all these token models still haven't fully worked out yet. So like, I'm just trying to figure out like, what are these infrastructure projects and how can we enable capital and more people into the crypto space? And I think that's going to be the turning point, or one of the turning points, which will bring this industry back to a more bullish sort of ecosystem.
And thanks for that point about bringing people into the space, which is a great segue into the next question. So this is a question for both Derek and Tobias. And the question is, how can people in the audience that are interested in pursuing a career in Web3 take their first steps into the space? Maybe we'll start this one with Tobias.
Can you quickly repeat the question? You cut out for me for like 3 seconds.
So how can people who are in the audience today that are interested in pursuing a career in Web3, how can they take the first steps into the Web3 space?
Yeah, I think Derek, that is probably a very, very good example, right? I think research is a really important factor, right? Because especially the space is evolving so fast, and there's so much BS in the industry. Like, so many people have so many different ideas about the whole crypto industry, and there's so many wrong advisors in the space, and so many people who claim to do something or give you strategies, and like, people are obviously inclined to do it because they look for the fast capital, right? But I think you need to understand for yourself, if you really want to be in that space for long term, is like the big why behind it, right? Because ideally crypto shouldn't be, or it wasn't meant to be, the money gambling operations, right? There is a big, and Derek mentioned a couple of really good use cases in the beginning. There's a lot of really interesting use cases in crypto, right? And it simplifies a lot of stuff across finance, operations, tech, gaming, ownership. And I think you need to be excited about this. And the more research you do and the more the underlying concepts you understand, the better it will be for your access point, right? And then I think you just need to figure out the ecosystem you want to be part in, or is it, if you have a finance background, like DeFi might be an interesting angle, right? If you're from a traditional gaming point of view, if you've been always a gamer you might even find out like what is wrong with the current economies and how can we fix it, right? I think research is one of the most important factors in the space to make your own backed opinion by facts and figures. And then once you have done that, I think you will already be so plugged in communities and access points across all the different channels that it's probably going to be way easier for you to find the career path, right? And it could be on a professional side, it could be more on a personal side, but you will understand sort of why the technology is here and why people are excited about it, and why people have been in the space for so long and don't want to go back, right? Because it is a very specific point of view.
And Derek?
Yeah, I for sure agree with Tobias, right? I think the why question is the one that is quite important. So I think for myself, right, I think what really helped was I classified the space into 3 distinct categories, right? Because we often conflate certain terminologies within the space, right? Web3, blockchain, crypto, right? These people use these terms interchangeably, and it's no fault of theirs, and perhaps they can be conflated, right? But I like to see them as different, right? So please don't quote me on this, right? Because I don't want to create some new definition, right? That is my own, but I see them as distinct, right? So Web3 is really, I would say, more of a cultural movement, right? It sounds lofty, but to me, that is what it is, right? Right now, as the space consolidates equality because of what's happening right now, macro conditions, geopolitical tensions, and of course, what's happening within the space that I described, right? I feel like the space is consolidating into Web3 personnel, right? People who truly believe in the power of this space, who, see this as a movement of sorts, right? These will be the true builders who will stay even in the bear or winter. Yeah, so that's Web3. For blockchain, right, that's the tech side of things, right? If you are a dev, if you are a coder, yeah, that's probably where, this space can be good for you, in terms of tech, because right now, like Tobias mentioned, right, we are in the transitionary period, right, where actually infrastructure has come out a lot more, right? So if you are dev, you are a builder, you're passionate about, building something from scratch and really having a direct impact on the space, right? As nascent as this, right? I think then there'll be a good domain for you to enter, right? Just the blockchain side of things. And then finally, there's the crypto side of things. To me, that's really the more commercial / business side of things, right? If you're here for, let's say, the profits, the high APRs, right? The yield farming, the emissions, right? Just printing money and things like that, then perhaps you fall more under this category, right? And it's not saying that, Loke don't come in and things like that. Not really, right? This side can be really good for economists, right? The designing of tokenomics, game theory, right? To bootstrap users, to bootstrap TVL, things like that. But if let's say you realize that your why, right, your main goal, like Tobias mentioned, is actually to just profit and earn money, right? Then perhaps the blunt way to put it is, you may not thrive as a builder within Web3. You may be better off as a crypto trader, for example. So I like to, split it up this way to look at things like that. Because to be brutally honest, right, this space is one that's really volatile. I'm sure that, we all know it by now, right? So you have to, like Tobias said, you have to be sure of your why before you come in, right? And research research and education are king in this space, because everything is out there, everything is free on Twitter. There's no excuse to not, learn about this on your own. So yeah.
And before we end off the session and go into the Q&A part, what kind of last advice would you leave the audience with regards to the space? Maybe you can start with Tobias for this one.
I think you have to be. I think you have to keep your eye open. I think what is really challenging about the crypto space is, I don't know, if it doesn't matter if you're an investor, a developer, or entrepreneur. I think the space is just changing so tremendously. If I would stop, I think looking at the crypto space for 3 months, I probably wouldn't be up to date anymore, right? Because that's how fast community is changing. That's how fast technology is changing. That's how fast preferences are changing. And for example, I think you need to figure out, like, how do you stay behind the hype, right? I mean, the first gaming deal we've done in 2018, we didn't know it was a term play to earn, right? And we had challenging raising, and now it's one of the largest games in the world, right? So I think you have to figure out, like, be ahead of the curve and try to understand where the technology has the biggest adoption point, and then do your research, keep up to date, and look for builders who have a very similar vision than you, and then sort of support them as much as you can, right? It could be from a capital perspective, or it could be, of course, also from, if you want to work with them, or if you're a QL, opinion leader, influencer, you can also drive value. I think that's kind of like the key point, which I would give everyone in the audience.
And Derek?
Yeah, I think, Tobias has mentioned most of the things I want to say, just not what I say as well. So I think just really be sure of your own value add. Be sure of why you want to do this before you come in. And yeah, I think that's about it from me.
Cool. Thanks, guys. So now that's the end of the moderated questions part. Right now, we'll turn over to the audience, and I see there are quite a few questions. So the first one would be for the both of you, and anyone can pick this up. So what are your views on NFTs? Gary V says that only 95% of NFTs will survive. What do you think? Given NFT trading volumes have dropped off significantly as of late, and OpenSea has retrenched 20% of their employees, is there a future for NFTs?
You want to go first, Tobias, or you want me to take it first?
Feel free to go first.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, it's not 95, right? Yeah, 5%. Yeah. So only 5% of NFTs will survive. Right? I mean, sure. With the amount of volume of NFT projects out there right now, I wouldn't be surprised that number is lower, right? But I think it would be false to say that the NFT space would die if only 5% will survive, right? Because as I mentioned just now, right, I think this space, right, by and large, not just the different sub-verticals, the whole crypto space at large, right, is consolidating equality right now, right? And that means it's a ruthless process, right? We'll see statistics like that constantly thrown out, right? 95% of projects fail, right? But the key thing is the 5% good enough, right? And I think based on the direction that we're heading towards now, where, like I said again, this bear is good for the space in that it has woken us up from a slumber of sorts, right? We're realizing that Ponzi-nomics don't work, right? APRs purely to bootstrap users, they don't work, right? Same for the NFT space, right? They're realizing that you have to have true utility. It has to have true value accrual imbued within these projects. And I think in recent times, we are seeing quite a few of those come up, right? I think for Spartan Labs, we'll be sharing some articles about these actually. So you can keep an eye out for, our socials and things like that. But there are some projects that actually are, imbuing real utility in these projects. And to me, if they survive, then if they are part of the 5%, then why not? This space, is something that has a lot of value and potential as well. So, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I agree that it's very much on the utility side of things. And that could be across different areas. I mean, we invest in a company, ASM, Altered State Machine, which provides brain for NFTs, right? So you can train your NFTs, which then has a lot of interest in games and in metaverses and all sorts of things. And they received a term sheet at $1 billion just now, right? Despite the market. So obviously they have been around for a bit, but like as soon as people are able to bring utilities for the NFT space, that I think makes it really interesting. I mean, we as a fund, we don't typically buy in NFT collections or anything unless we have a stake on the equity side in one of our portfolio companies. We might support it on a very small scale. But for us, for us, it's really about the utility side of things. And I think now we just need to figure out what are we going to do with all these JPEGs people bought at very, very high prices. Right? Of course, you can use it as an asset in itself, right? But I don't think necessarily that's purely what the NFT space was made for. Right? I think like all this different, there's so many different things we can do. We just haven't figured it out yet, at least not on a grand scale. We've been a bit of hesitant on the NFT side as well, but like stuff which we see a clear trajectory to a use case. That's like the 2 or 3 sort of deals in the NFT space we've done so far.
Thanks, guys. And this is a question from Tobias. Beyond infrastructure, what areas of tech do you see would revolutionize Web3, like TCP or IP did for Web1?
I think there's a couple of things, right? So I think what this space needs, and like the tech generally right now is still early, right? So we haven't seen a lot of really sophisticated tech, and I think if the tech got more and more sophisticated, we had all sorts of like challenges with it, right? Even like on the pure side of like making the crypto space decentralized, we already see so many issues, right? I mean, the Solana debate, what happened, like all these things basically now gives questions of like, hey, how are we, like how back to basics, how back to native, what the original plan for the whole space was. So I think besides the layer side of things, I want to see solutions which go really back, making transactions cheap, figure out how we can give the space a decentralized aspect without overcomplicating things, right? And giving the governance back to the people who are involved and not who are the biggest whales in the space, right? So we need to figure out a lot of stuff on the governance side, on bringing decentralization to the space where it should be. And I think that's where like the technology in various different ways needs to move on and needs to be more sophisticated, right? And that obviously ties into the infrastructure side, but I think it goes way deeper. It's also an ethics question, right? It's a bunch of different things, which I find exciting. But as we're so early in a space and like all these more sophisticated solutions came up in the last years, I think we're still going to be like a little bit away from having a solution which works on grand scale across multiple different ecosystems.
This is a question for both of you. With the recent crash of Celsius, do you think there's a future for centralized finance?
Centralized finance as in TradFi or?
So CeFi, probably.
CeFi probably.
Yeah,
oh,
CeFi.
Okay, right. Okay, because okay. Yeah, I think that if anything, this may help the CeFi space flourish in the future. When the right steps are actually brought in, right? So, for example, I think that right now there's a lot of conversation surrounding regulation, right? And I think that that's an important conversation to be had, right? It's not the Web3 space and regulation, they shouldn't be seen as very polarizing or dialectical. Okay, not, I think that's the wrong word. Sorry, just polarizing concepts, right? And I think that the recent collapse of Celsius, perhaps, right, has expedited the conversation, right? So I think there definitely is space still for CeFi firms, right? Perhaps moving forward there can be more transparency, more transparent audits. It's perfect, to have blockchain technology for that, right? And perhaps let's say for something like stable coins, or which is in a way CeFi, right? We can have hard assets as collaterals, instead of like algorithmic stable coins, right? Yeah, perhaps it doesn't have to be like a very extreme form of regulation. It can just be like hard assets as collaterals and measures like that. So I think it's still here to stay, right? I don't think that it is totally dead. Yeah.
And Tobias, your take?
Same question.
Yes, same question. Do you think there's a space for CeDeFi, given what's happened to Celsius?
No, I 100% think there's still, right? I mean, it is a space where a lot of people, and especially I would say a lot of maybe not the crypto OGs were immediately jumping on, but a lot of people want to get access to crypto, right? Easy access to crypto, and I have the benefit of having a higher yield than putting the money in the bank. I think it also depends on how overall the interest rate are gonna change, right? What banks are going to be offering you, and of course, I think these companies, such as the future companies in that space, or the ones which are surviving, need to be a lot more transparent of how where the money is coming from, right? Where they're lending into. Is it more prime lending? What is happening? Like, how does it work? And I think that's what customers are going to be demanding for. And I think even if we would end up having only 8% or 10% instead of 20%, right? I think people will still be happy and try to use some of these services. But so yeah, I do think there's a space for it. I think the companies just have to be a lot more transparent, which then of course is going to jeopardize in some yield, because most of the yield has been generated because not so much collateralization or other sort of practices have been happening. But I do think that people are going to demanding some services, and they're still going to use it. It might take a little bit of time to recover image and branding, but yeah, I do think in general that probably is there's a part for it.
And given that there's a lot of talk of regulation after what has happened with Celsius, 3AC, how do you think increasing regulations would impact the level of adoption and innovation within crypto? And maybe we can start with Derek.
Right. I think I mentioned just now, right? So I think regulation shouldn't be seen as like a pure evil in this space, right? They are not polarizing concepts. So I'll be honest, right? I don't want to throw out something right now and say that, oh, look, regulation will impact the space this way, because honestly we don't know yet. But I think an important first step is that we open up the conversation, right, with the right people, right, with the right circles. These two concepts, Web3 and regulation, should come together more, right, to have more conversations on this topic, right? And I think at Spartan Labs, once again, right, we're going to write more on that, right? So yeah, we'll post that on our socials when it's done. I think these are conversations that should be had, right, before we even think about how this impact the space. It must always be done in a stepwise process. There's no need for knee-jerk reactions, right? All these things happen for a reason. We can learn from them. But like I said, stepwise process, no need for any knee-jerk reactions. And I hope there are more conversations around around these things will come to dominate our space in the next months to come. Yeah.
Tobias, any other thoughts about regulations within crypto?
I mean, I 100% think they're coming, and I think they need to come. We just need to figure out like how exactly they're going to be rolled out, how much time it's going to take, and how different governments are going to be reacting. But I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing for regulations. I mean, if companies are acting ethically and if they're doing stuff right and if they're acting best interest for customers, investors, they, in an ideal world, they shouldn't be that scared of regulations, right? But of course I get it. It's probably like a little bit of an earlier stage, and it can significantly impact how the industry is evolving. But I absolutely think that there will be more regulations, especially in the stablecoin space. Probably will be turning up. And there might be even some governments who might banning the whole space again due to this, right? Or at least trying to restrict it as much as possible. But I think the key is it's probably already too big to ban it fully, right? Or it's hard to like ban it fully because people anyway engage with it in different ways. So I think it's more like how can we figure out how can we make it work and how can we even use it in a positive way for all of us. Right. So I think governments, need to be a lot more forward thinking into that space. And some of them are, some of them are still not really. So I'm excited to see where the journey goes, but I'm a big favor of regulations and, keeping basic guidelines in place, which protects investors and retailers, especially.
Thanks, guys. Okay, this is a question for Derek. Given you mentioned DeFi as one of your interests, your vertical interests. So the question is, would you agree that while we see an overall decline in the crypto market, including that of the DeFi sector, DeFi did its job in the market? The question goes on to say, while the lending sector has various tumbles, Compound and Aave have seemingly performed as what it was intended for, liquidating collateralized positions without any bias.
Right. See why you read the Pantera report, right? The DeFi did its job report. So yeah, it was a good article. It was a good report. I agree that DeFi did its job. I mean, for all intents and purposes, right? These protocols they function like they should have, right? There was no repeat of the Black Thursday, right, where Maker crashed because of Ethereum, things like that. Yeah, I guess they survived the stress test. I guess like infrastructure wise, right? They survived the stress test. But in terms of DeFi doing its job in the market, that's a statement that I kind of disagree with, right? I don't think that it served the true purpose of what DeFi set out to be, right? The whole idea of crypto and DeFi is a very lofty ideal. We will not get there until many iterations later, and I don't think we have achieved that right now. So I don't think DeFi has done its job, right? Like I mentioned, DeFi in 2021, I think. Not sure of time because yeah, in 2021, right? It was the DeFi summer, right? DeFi didn't serve the purpose, that it really should have, right? It was, like I mentioned, a lot of high APRs, a lot of bootstrapping users for the sake of TVL. It was not sustainable, right? It was not based on true revenue generation. It was not based on true value generation, right? So it's shifting away from that now, right? Hopefully we'll see DeFi, play its real role in the next years or months to come. But yeah, that statement, I don't think it did its job. Yeah.
Thanks, Derek. Okay, I think we have time for two more questions. So the one is for Tobias. How would you benchmark a metaverse project against another project? And maybe you could do it really quickly, given that we are nearly past time. I've just been pinged by Kasif.
Yeah, I think how can you benchmark it, right? So it depends a little bit on the stage of the metaverses, right? So let's say if they're already a little bit later stage and they have users, I obviously look about two different metrics, right? One of them is how our NFTs and land sales are going. How has the asset price appreciated or not? But I think another very important factor for me is of how many active users does the metaverse actually have, and how long. Even if you can find this out, it's like how long are those people spending and what are they actually doing, right? And then I think that's one part. And another part is sort of the partnerships angle, right? Because ideally you want to add more features into a metaverse. You want to bring in brands, you want to bring in, interesting personalities, influencers. So there's also a way of like, how is it perceived? I think in metaverse, you still have to look at community, right? You have to look at how popular is it? How popular is a token? Maybe even if they have one or have one yet. If it's extremely early and you don't have all these metrics to look at, and if it's basically just a white paper or they just have launched or in building the product, I think it's really important to look at the founders, like how do they have experience in such an undertaking and such an endeavor. I think it's very important to look at the skill set in the team and what kind of metaverse are they planning, right? Is it a very niche metaverse where you can see a lot of adoption growing, or is it the same as they're building a sandbox 2.0 or like another big metaverse you've already seen before? So I think you need to have a clear differentiator and either making something way better or making something way different, or covering a niche where you see a clear differentiator between them. Because like, trust me, we see so many metaverses, they really have to be substantially better or covering something very specific.
Thanks, Tobias. Okay, so I think, last question. Last question is for Derek. This is from Robert from APEC DAO. Do you consider lending and renting NFTs essential utilities for the NFT market to thrive?
Yeah, for sure. For sure, because I think right now the problem with the NFT space is that it's quite static, right? It's not the most liquid, right? And I think there are a few people trying to solve that, right? There's some perps like platforms, things like lending and borrowing and perps, right? It will be I think a very essential primitive, right, for other perhaps NFT XDeFi protocols, right? To build on top of, because that will foster, things like collateral liquidation, right, for NFT platforms, collateralized lending platforms, things like that. It is always useful to have this space more liquid, become more liquid, right, and more dynamic. Right? So I for sure agree with that actually. Yeah, but I mean there are a lot of utilities even within the lending and renting space. So yeah, it depends on the true value accrual as well. Yeah.
Cool. So thank you so much for your questions, everyone. I'm going to hand the time back to Kashi, who will wrap it up.
Okay, thanks everyone. Thanks Sam, Toby, and also Derek for joining us for today's session. And members of the audience, I really hope you learned something from today's session. Got to learn about the macro outlook as well as the future trends. Please follow our speakers on LinkedIn. They're very active over there. And also do consider joining our Talent and Web3 community to stay ahead of our upcoming events. We actually have one event coming up next week. It's actually a physical meetup. We hope to see you all over there. Let me just quickly share the link. You can actually sign up for it. And it's at Club Street on the 20th of July. So yeah, we hope to see you all there. So once again, thank you all for coming and hope you all have a good night. Thank you.
Speakers, can we stay back for a bit? I just want to take a photo.
Okay.
Sure.
Some people are taking a bit longer to leave. I'm not sure whether they're still there.
Yeah, I think everyone's left.
Okay. Kashif, can you stop sharing? Then we can take a picture. Thanks so much, Sam, Toby, and Derek. That was amazing. I learned a lot as well. I mean, we expected more, but I guess it's a Monday night. But anyway, we'll be releasing the recording and there'll be someone summarizing the insights. So I'm sure there'll be more who will benefit from the value of your sharing as well. So can I just take a group photo, if you don't mind? Maybe 3, 2, 1. Okay. Thank you so much.